Welcome back to the Mastering Sales and Negotiation podcast from Huthwaite International. I'm your host, Nick Martin, Director of Learning Solutions. This week on the podcast, we spoke with Steve Lindsey, Managing Director at Lincoln West and the organiser of the National Sales Conference. We're looking back at our main three takeaways: collaboration and learning from and with each other, what good looks like in a salesperson, and the way people get their learning and the way they want to get it. I'm joined by Tony Hughes, Chief Executive Officer at Huthwaite International, who actively promotes the cause for sales and negotiation excellence in business development and procurement. A regular judge on many awards programs, Tony is keen to see innovation in all aspects of business, particularly in new methods to ensure positive behaviour change in Huthwaite clients. Why don't we just get started? Okay, Tony, I think there were probably three main takeaways from that. What would you consider to be those?
The first one for me would be the fact that people are more interested in learning from each other now.
For me, I think it would be helping senior sales leaders and salespeople understand what good looks like when they're interacting with their customers. So knowing what to say and what outcome is going to happen and what not to say perhaps as well.
So I need a third one then, is that?
You do need a third one.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked quite a lot about was choice. Yeah. You know, it was the way that people get their learning. I know we talked about the intergenerational stuff, but
yeah, we did.
But people being able to get their learning in the way they want it and their information in the way they want it.
Right, having heard those three things, Tony, let's take a much deeper dive into that conversation.
Well, it was an interesting conversation. It was good for me because I've known Steve a long time and we've never really had a conversation like that before, which is great. It makes it even more interesting. And of course, we never know what direction things are going to go in when you're doing something like this. But yeah, that collaboration piece, I thought that was interesting because it's something that we've known at Huthwaite for a while would be a valuable thing to do. Yeah. And I must admit, over the years, in some cases, we've had to convince people it would be a valuable thing to do. But now, as you know, that's not the issue anymore. Everybody accepts the fact that collaboration amongst peers works much better to accelerate the learning. I thought it was interesting that he talked about it in terms of a conference because that's not something that we've come across before. We've come across people having round tables, which, to be fair, in my experience of conferences, because they've been badly set up, has really been about, well, that's networking. How do I sell my stuff to somebody, as opposed to it being about collaborative learning? So I thought that was pretty interesting, really. Yeah,
what I liked was the fact that if you're with other people who have similar interests and want similar outcomes, then why not learn from them? You do that at a conference. Why not do it in the learning environment as well? And that's what we endeavour to do in every situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in ours, as you know, we often do this within a company. Yeah, but we also do it in our public/open programs, and people learn in there from different business to different business. Yeah, and that's always an interesting thing to watch and to be a part of.
Yeah, and in another world, maybe we could also help them out with the AI side of it as something that can be available to people to collaborate with. Not with a person, but with a bot. But that's another discussion.
Yeah, well, it is. And I was actually quite surprised that Steve didn't make more reference to AI, to be honest, because I do think there are implications for what's happening with AI into his world. Yeah. But it may not be that he's seen the big impact of it just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people are nervous about it still. They know they've got to embrace it, but they're wondering what it is they're supposed to embrace.
Or like you said, is it a shiny new toy? And people, because it was originally, I think, and by originally, I mean like 12 months ago, it was this, well, we've got to use AI for things then. And then, of course, it's now been a bit more cautious and there's lots of issues around intellectual property and data and stuff like that is now coming to the fore. Yes. But there's no getting away from the fact we use it, as you know, we use it to support through our learning journeys. And I'm sure it's probably having a bigger impact on Steve than he might have realised in that conversation.
Yeah, I think so. Perhaps you should be called It's Everywhere, i.e. Okay, so the other thing that struck me about that was the importance of having leaders having some way of knowing what good is and being aware of how they are and how they impact upon others, and salespeople in particular. Have you got any ideas about how we can help with that?
Yes, but it really goes back to where Huthwaite started from. You've used this the same as I have for a while. If you ask a salesman what makes them good, because they're a good performer, they'll tell you. But then if you ask a buyer what made them buy, they'll tell you something different.
Yes.
Right. So that lack of empirical kind of evidence as to why somebody's performed, and obviously what we did was to supply that empirical evidence by research. That's not necessarily happening when you get to the senior leadership and C-suite. So people have got to where they are. Not everybody, but a lot of people have got to where they are because they were good performers.
Yeah.
Now, it would be really interesting if you were able to ask the C-suite why they got to be CEO, for example.
Yeah.
And then you ask the people underneath them why you think they got to be the CEO and see if there was a correlation between the two.
Well, what struck me, he said, I think Steve used the word imposter.
Yeah.
And vulnerability as well. I think that's very true. When you get to that senior level, you're kind of looking around and thinking, yeah, I've done it, but why?
Why and how?
How did I do it? And I think if we could help, and we can help people understand, shine a light on what it is that they've done well and why, and what it is that perhaps haven't done well and why, that could only help.
It can, but to do that, the CEO's the CEO. They're probably not going much further.
No.
So they've got to have a willingness to do that in order to develop people in other parts of the business as opposed to develop themselves. So I know a lot of people would go, well, look at me and you'll see how to make this work. But as I said before, as we know, there's a good chance that there's a big perception gap between what they are good at and what they think they're good at.
Yeah. I suppose if we were able to give them some kind of behavioural repertoire to use, a toolkit, I hate the phrase, but use it as and when they need it.
That's what we do. So, that's one measurement tool, isn't it, that we use. So we talked a bit there about what makes people good.
Yeah.
We didn't do a lot of that with Steve, but we did talk about the fact that it is important that people understand why they've got to where they are and what makes them good, so that we can then, and what we do is then go and teach other people how to do that, which is great. But we come across things now where people are saying, well, what's a salesperson for? Because I can get all this information about products, about services.
Yeah.
Why do I need to be sold to by a salesperson? And from in our language, what value does a salesperson bring?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say?
Well, I mean, for me, that's the chance to actually learn a little bit more about the real motivations and concerns and desires of the individual that you're talking to. Now, AI or any kind of data-driven information might provide some of that, but it's not going to provide that human interaction that gives you the sense of, well, what's really important. And I think that comes out in the conversation, in the face-to-face piece.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going back quite a few years, I remember working with a business, large building business, and they'd had some consultancy, and I won't say which one it was, but it was at the time when the internet was just becoming to the fore in the sales world. And this company used to have account directors who would go and see all of their potential customers and clients. And then this consultancy organization said, well, actually, that's not efficient. What you need to do is to let the smaller ones buy on the internet, and only have account directors for the big accounts. Mm-hmm. So they did this, started moving into it, and after about a year, they realised that what had happened is a lot of the sales had dropped, and when they looked at it, it was because they'd got it the wrong way around. Mm-hmm. With the smaller people, the account directors were seen as a trusted advisor and were actually helping them to make decisions and giving them information. Yeah. With the larger accounts, they didn't need it. They wanted to order 3 million bricks at a time. Yeah. And they could order off the internet. So actually, they got it completely the wrong way around about the value, because they were seeing the value being for the supplier, not the value being for the customer. And I think with sales, that salespeople being the differentiator is more to the fore now than it's ever been. Yeah. Because there's so many other ways of getting the information.
Yeah, I completely agree, Tony, because you mentioned the word trusted advisor. I mean, that's critical, isn't it? Because you're going to have to potentially build some pain for people and talk about things that are very sensitive. Yeah. And you don't really want to just be doing that interacting with some kind of data or system-driven discussion. You want to be able to trust the person because the person has demonstrated they understand you. And I think that's crucial.
And you've got to be honest. You have to be a proper trusted advisor, not just somebody who wants to be one. There used to be a sales training programs years ago called Trusted Advisor. And when I ever looked into them, they were about how to convince people you were a trusted advisor, not the fact that you were a trusted advisor. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I like the way Steve does what he does in his business. He's always stuck to his principles of, this is about the people coming on the conferences and providing value for them, not the people that are, I won't say paying the bills, but not the people who want the platform to go and speak to people. And he's always stuck to that principle. Yeah,
in fact, I definitely got the sense that it's a principle-driven business that he's working in. And, really, as a salesperson, and we have to do it ourselves every day, not to feel that you're doing the right thing by the customer is the wrong thing to do. And the only way you can do the right thing by the customer is figuring out what it is they really want.
Yeah. The other thing I liked about it was that story you gave about the German conferences where they take price off the table straight away, but there is no negotiation on price on German events. And when you look at that from our point of view as negotiators, that's very interesting because I think I said in the conversation, price is usually the most contentious thing, and it's usually the thing that's left till last when everything else has been settled. So if you take price off the table, you're actually then talking about what other issues are valuable to either side. So I thought that was, and he's had first-hand experience of that without realizing that was what was going to happen. And I think it's something that people can learn from, particularly around the contentiousness of price, and not everything is about price.
It's interesting as well because it almost forces you to focus on value, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If price is thrown away, then what else have you got to talk about?
It takes the monetary value off. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, people have got to convince that the price they're paying is okay for what they're going to get for it or give for it. But it certainly makes life different and focus on other issues.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pleased that they are going into the new Sales Awards because that's something that has been dear to my heart for a long, long time. And there's been a hiatus in that for probably the last before COVID, so probably another 6 years, I think, where there's been. And then previous awards, I know that all the people organising the awards have always professed to have the same principles that Steve's had, or has, but then they get sucked into, this large company here might buy 5 tables at this award ceremony. Will they buy 5 tables if they don't win? And if they don't win, will they buy 5 tables next year? Yeah. And it's always got that commerciality has always crept into it. Well, you've been to these things, but it's always that commerciality crept into it. And I just hope that this, I know it won't for this year, that it stays as its principled reason for being there, should we say.
What is it about it, the awards so far, that make it that principled approach, that make it objective and not, frankly, biased?
In what he's doing so far?
Yeah.
Well, I think from the way that it was sold to us, because we're sponsoring the Sales Director of the Year Award, or partnering with it. So I think the way it was sold to us was the fact that it is about innovation and the way that people do things. And it's truly about that, not about how many tables are you going to buy to come to this award ceremony. Yeah. And the fact that he's running it in conjunction with the sales conference, I think that will help that. And it's an adjunct to it rather than going, let's go down to the Savoy and pay £4,000 a table and we'll have 6 tables because we're a large company. And I think from our point of view, that principles of why people have won it is the most important thing, really.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't really touch in any great detail on the state of sales survey that he's done.
No.
What's your thinking on how we best talk about that, all the great stuff that's in that?
I think we should talk about it, and possibly in another podcast or some other, because some really interesting stuff came out of it.
Really?
Too much to get into here, really, but I think the fact that it was asking questions of different people in different parts of the organisation, and I know that I think Steve's going to do that again next year, and keep it running through to see how things are changing all the time. So I do think we need to look at that. I mean, over the years, I've lost track of how many of these conferences, things that I've been to in the past, where the title has been the future of sales, and everybody's trying to second guess what's going to happen next. Yeah. And I think that's less of a case now because the pace changes so fast in relation to other things that's happening in the world. You know, if somebody had said, what's the future of sales 3 years ago, would we have been talking about AI?
No.
Probably not. You know, so the pace of change is so fast that in many ways sales are adapting to it and having to adapt to it. So therefore guessing the future is quite difficult. In fact, I remember back in the late 90s, Neil Rackham, who started Huthwaite, came over from the States and was talking to all of our company. And it was almost like the death of a salesman. And he was holding up a CD that said, this is the future of sales. And actually, when you look at it, it wasn't. And the same happened with training. You know, this is the future of training, all digital, everything being done, and it wasn't. So trying to second guess, I think you do have to have a little bit of that forethought, but trying to second guess exactly what's going to happen is quite a difficult task, really.
Yeah, I think from our bread and butter, our learning and developers hats on, it's around, if I had to take a punt, and I'm not a betting man, but I would say that it'll be cooperating with technology, nothing more, so co-piloting. So we as subject matter experts will work with systems.
And Steve said that. Steve said within his business, you know, the medium that's being used, people coming and doing different things on the different tracks. It's not all now people just standing up on a stage. You know, they're in that parallel way that they now bring different means of communication and different interactions with people, and not just the kind of glitzy things you see at the big shows. But yeah, so it's an interesting conversation. And I'm looking forward to spending a bit more time with Steve because I've known Steve for a long time on and off, as I've said, but hearing his views there has kind of more cemented a relationship. I think he's doing things in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Let's hope that partnership continues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Tony.